After 20 years of oppression, Leia Wilder has freed the colony, one of the last human cities in the Nordbend, from the wolves. But freedom has come at a terrible cost. Radical forces threaten unrest. Wolf shifters and humans are more divided than ever. Leia's nightmares have returned, except this time it isn't her own death she sees. It's Henrik's, the wolf shifter she has saved the previous fall, who possesses a terrible magic that has marked him as a target among humans and shifters alike. Attacks on the colony increase by the day. Something lurks out in the dark, frozen woods, just beyond what Leia can see in her visions, and she must discover who is hunting Henrik before it's too late. Hello everyone, and welcome once again to the Heir's Lair. I'm your host, Jonathan Taylor. In today's video, I am returning to Kat Kinney's Direwolf series with a look at the first installment sequel, Darkwitch. The TLDW for this review is as follows. This book is a significant improvement over its predecessor, with a better grasp on characterization, action beats, as well as general plotting. I found myself enjoying it a lot more. Okay, now that I've gotten that simplified description out of the way, how about I talk about what really makes this book distinctive a little bit more in depth. Its plot begins a few weeks after the end of the last book, with the war between humans and wolf shifters, who I now realize might actually be based on skinwalkers, having come to an end, and the two sides now having to coexist within a newly established societal whole. This new society is being threatened by forces both from outside and from within, which means that the principal characters... sorry that I have to mute this as insurance. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah. The principal characters are now stuck playing a dangerous chase and deduction game in order to meet their responsibilities. And now let me talk about this book, about other parts that define this book. And as I've said in the TLDW, there are lots of improvements that this book has when compared to its predecessor. Almost as though Kat actually wrote a whole different series between these installments. The most notable change that occurs is in how she handles her character work. As in, every character is now more fleshed out and more distinctive. I now understand what makes each of them unique, and what it is that their drives, worries, perspectives, and intentions are influenced by. That shines through not just in the main plot itself and how they handle its twists and turns, but also to some extent on how they handle the unfolding drama. Some of the drama that unfolds is petty, like how Leia has trouble adjusting to living with her mother. Some of it is to remind you that you're reading a romance, like how Leia and Henrik, the main couple, keep trying to tell each other to stay safe, even though they constantly place themselves, or are required to place themselves, in harm's way. And some of it is actually profound about the weight and influence of legacy and identity as far as it pertains to certain key characters. The change of focus for Kat Kinney, as far as the setting and the drivers of the action is concerned, has done her quite well. And she has taken to the change from somewhat clear moral divides to almost full-on ethical ambiguity surprisingly well, if I may say so myself. I am now better capable of understanding what it is that each character wants to achieve, how they set out their objectives. Speaking of objectives, the plot points of this book are laid out in a much more easy to follow way. it becomes much clearer what it is that that characters are after, based upon not just their own inclinations, but what the world itself also also makes possible. A particular note here is the way Cat expands the magic system. It does build upon what has been established within the first book, but it also expands it in such a way as to make the plotting somewhat more flexible. Unfortunately, the way she has decided to use this plot's new flexibility is to introduce a sudden escalation in the threat levels the villains pose right towards the end, which is not something you should do. I guess that she does that for drama, but really there are other ways you could have you really could have gotten that you could have gotten that drama done. You could argue that the writing around the problem points is vague or mysterious enough to where it's not that much of a problem, but in doing so, you run into a separate problem. Yeah, okay, ambulance, pass by. You run into a second problem, namely the fact that the writing is vague enough to justify anything, which means that the author subverts the attention and interest and investment that that her readers bring to the story, which again is not a good thing. And the worst part about that is that she doesn't really have to do that. Like, she doesn't really have to manipulate the threat in that way, because given both sides of this book's main couple are connected to the political and military establishment within the city, they would be connected to to all of the things that make make the plot that make the plot and the threat level meaningful. Cat could have explored that. The Outcrossed series, which I constantly gush about, and also happens to be a werewolf series somewhat based on skinwalkers, does that brilliantly, and how it manages to control information flow between its between its principal cast, and then showcase how each of them reacts to these reacts to the change in information, and the resulting changes in events, and how it is that they have to that they have to consider them. That and for that reason I keep gushing about it. However, for some reason, Cat was simply incapable of thinking of doing that. Another thing I want to talk about before closing out is the world building, which is one of the things I praised about the previous book. However, just like the other thing I praised the previous book for, that strength doesn't really find itself in this book. In this book as well, there are some locations within the city that are described, but I have no clue what their what the spatial relation between these places is, and I have a hard time really piecing together how this city looks, and really what makes it tick, what makes it operational. Which I have to say, given how effective she was at establishing that on a larger scale, and when she was a much younger, less experienced author, that is a real disappointment. Overall, while I recognize that this book carries some of its plenty of its own flaws, it does know to counter them quite effectively with at least some of its own strengths. My final rating for Darkwitch is a 3 out of 5. And that was my review. Thank you for your attention. If you enjoyed it, well then please leave a like, maybe even share this video wherever you think other people will like it as well. If you have anything you'd like to add, either to this review or to the book itself, well that's what the comment section is for. And if you want to see when my next video gets released, well then please subscribe. Ideally also ring the bell or do whatever else YouTube will ask of you in order to keep you notified. My own book, Heir to the Empire: The Next Generation, is available at most major book retailers under a master link in the description down below, right past my social media, which I also suggest you check out, should you choose to do so. Until next time, I'm Jonathan Taylor, and this has been the Heir's Lair.